Have you ever noticed the hyper extremes that liberals flip and flop back and forth between? We went from literally years and decades that everybody is special to now apparently no one is special. Barrington, Rhode Island has been known for years of having a great school system. Many residents within the state of Rhode Island relocate to Barrington despite the higher cost of living and high taxes because they believe that the schools there gave their kids a competitive edge educationally, allowing them opportunities for academic scholarships into colleges and universities to give them a leg up, if you will, on beginning their lives and their careers. But apparently all that is going away. As of March the 30th, the school administration announced that they were going to do away with honors programs because they needed, quote, educational equity. As one parent said, "You guys have got equity extremism." You know, there's an old saying, when you try to make something, quote, fair, you're about to make it unfair for somebody else. I've talked about this before. Many years ago, I was a parent of a couple of young boys, and we were involved in our community Little League. The president of the Little League had resigned. I was a coach in the system, so I was going to the big meeting where we would be choosing a new president of the league. I sat there with several other coaches, including the outgoing president, and there was basically no candidates except this one woman who was talking about she wanted to make the game, she wanted to make the program fair. Now, I'm a parent. Of course I want things fair for kids. I was pastoring a church, Christian school, educator, and administrator. As a coach, yes, we want rules, we want it to be fair. But the way she kept talking about, I want it to be fair, I began to understand that what she really meant was we're going to penalize the kids that can and reward the kids that can't. And she talked about how what a child who drops a ball that they were supposed to have caught must feel, and that should be an out because they tried. So one of the other coaches kind of sheepishly raised their hand and asked the question, but what about the young man that hit the ball, or the young girl that hit the ball? And she said, well, they can still go to first base and be safe. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, how can you be out and safe? How can the ball be deemed a caught and also be deemed a hit? And the more I listened to this madness, I realized this was about, and this was many years ago before we knew the term woke. This was about extreme just wokeism. Because once you make it, quote unquote, a special rule so that somebody who can't feels like they can, you have automatically made it unfair to the kid who can. And I'm not talking about being mean to kids. I'm not talking about ostracizing kids. But obviously, at that level of play, which is instructional level, you work with them, you are training them, and at some point, there is a natural understanding that some kids can, some kids can't. And the kids who can't in this do something over here that these other kids can't do. You know, it is amazing the gifts and the talents and the unique abilities that God has given to everybody. But if we're going to make everything equitable, if we're going to make everything to this point of this unrealistic idea of fair, then what's going to happen is it's not going to be fair, number one, to the people who can, and it isn't even fair to those who can't, because it makes everything at that point subpar. It makes everything at that point underwhelming. And everything suffers across the board. So now we take this into education, where the Barrington, Rhode Island school system has decided there will be no more honors in classes like English. Well, right away, parents wanted to know, but what about the kids who you're talking about their honor points, and this plays into their college educations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, again, classic white liberal school administrator saying, we have to be equitable. One man got up at the meeting who identified himself as a dentist, a father, and minority, and said, wait a minute, you guys are off on this. And I want to read what it was that he said. You guys are doing this for someone like me. My parents didn't speak English. Nobody asked me how I felt about this. Like I'm the person that you're supposed to be trying to help, so you guys have your own idea of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. And it doesn't take into account an actual person like me that went through the worst public schools in Chicago, lived in neighborhoods where people are shooting each other, drug dealers and gang members on the street corners. That's where I grew up until I was about 12. So how come no one is asking me? I've got a lot to share about this. And he went on to say, if you guys really believe in equity, then pick an average or below average dentist and see what you get. Oh. But you guys get the ratings and you pick the best that's available. And you know what? For some fields, that's exactly what you need. You need the best. And I'm here to speak about that. It's embarrassing that you guys have done this. And other fathers went on to say exactly the same thing. Look, you want a doctor that's about to perform a major operation on you to be the guy that barely made it through medical school? Or do you want the best of the best that you can get? And so this idea, and what we're really doing, and I've said this multiple times, this is a modern form of prejudice and racism. I am absolutely 100% convinced the biggest racists on the planet are liberals. Oh, I'm not talking about their bleeding heart and all of their platitudes that they love to speak about. But in reality, they truly are racist because they really believe that when they look at people of color, they are looking at people who are inferior. They can't do it for themselves. They can't figure it out. They can't get anywhere. They need, quote, they love to say the government, but what they're really saying is, you need me. You need the enlightened liberal to do it for you because you can't figure out how to get out from where you are. Well, liberals can't figure out how to get them out from where they are either, because look at the major cities in this country which are controlled by Democrats, and what do we have right now? Runaway crime, runaway homelessness, and the ghettos are just expanding and getting even worse and worse, and the poverty there is third world country. So if they know so much about how to be equitable and help, why are these people constantly being left further and further behind? Because again, they have stepped in as the new plantation master saying, you don't know what to do, so we'll give you a place to live, we'll give you a free income, we'll give you free food, free, because what they're really saying in a very racist way is, you are too stupid to know how to do this for yourself, so we will do it for you. You know what stories I love, whether in sports or in history or just in good old entertainment and fiction? I love the story of the underdog. I love the story of the overcomer. That individual that overcame the odds, that rose up against a series of circumstances where, you might look at it and say, boy, that's terrible. But they used it as a motivation to excel. How many politicians, particularly on the GOP side, every 4 years at the big convention, people of color talking about either being here as immigrants or growing up, Dr. Ben Carson, growing up in a single parent household, but his, mom made him spend his summers at the library reading, and he became this incredible surgeon. And yet, by the statistics and by liberal think, well, he's a person of color growing up in poverty. He can't do anything. We'll do it for him. And maybe he doesn't have to necessarily exist on welfare, but he's going to have a minimum wage job. And we're going to try to get that minimum wage to $20 an hour. See, it's liberals looking at people of color and saying, you're too stupid to do this on your own. We'll do it for you. Now, again, I'm not talking about individuals who purposely try to keep people down because of where they come from. But let's talk about the fact that every single person who's ever gotten anywhere, unless they were born into it and inherited it and somebody handed it to them. And by the way, when we want to talk about that kind of privilege, have you ever noticed that usually the second generation begins to tank what the first generation handed them? And by the third generation, it's gone. Simple illustration. A guy, maybe an immigrant, works hard, comes up with an idea, a product, a business. He excels, becomes a millionaire, a billionaire, and he turns the reins of the company over to his son. They don't quite do as well as they did under the dad. They're existing, they're kind of making it, but it certainly isn't where it was when granddad founded it. And now it gets handed off to the grandson, who either sells it out to another interest so they could just go play golf and water ski, at age 29. Or they've got all these new ideas and it needs to be done this way, and granddad and dad didn't know what they were doing, and they run it into the ground. So when you talk about privilege, no. It's not privilege that gets people where they are and keeps them there. It's brains, it's ability, it's talent, it's a work ethic, it's integrity. That's what gets people places. And by saying we're going to now make everything, quote, mediocrity, we're going to, this all goes back to when awards ceremonies, we gave every kid a trophy. You participated. You came in 77th place. You're awesome. And I sat through graduation ceremonies with speakers up there telling all the young people, you're special. And I'd had enough at one point, and I got up after one of those commencement speakers, and I said to all of my graduates, I said, look at me. We love you. We're for you. We want you to do well, but you're not special. You could have heard a pin drop when I said that. You're not special. You have got to go out and work and achieve by merit. Don't just think that somebody is always going to do it for you. And yet we have these school boards with their bleeding liberalism, once again telling parents, we know best. And what's amazing is the parents that are rising up against this in Rhode Island, which isn't exactly known for its conservative politics. It's a lot of Democrats. And again, the liberals within the Democratic Party in operation, it's just school system after school system after school system where they are telling parents, we know better for your kids. You want to talk about inequality of education. You talk about when schools were shut down and locked down because, Zig Heil, everything had to be shut down. Well, how many kids were stuck home who didn't have any internet capability? Didn't have an adult there to make sure they were actually watching and learning? What kind of disparity did that create? And now, to rectify that situation, We don't try to make the kids that are behind smarter. We try to make the kids that are ahead fall back and become dumber. This is the solution. I can't tell you how many kids through the years, and I was the administrator of 3 different schools, how many kids that we received whose parents transferred them to us because they were, quote, special ed, left behind. And I explained to a parent one day, I said, well, you know why that happens, don't you? And they said, well, these tests and this and that. I said, no. I said, why this happens is, and I said, I'm going to use some fictitious numbers here, but let's say in your particular school district, your school tax dollars and the school tax dollars of everyone in your district, it's $5,000 per student to educate them per year. I said, obviously, a lot of that gets offset by the state through state funding. And the state has everything in a tiered system. We learned about this during the pandemic and the outbreak when they were tiering hospitalizations. Hospitals got so much money for somebody who had COVID, so much more money for somebody who had to go into the ICU with COVID, and so much more of somebody who died with COVID. So all of a sudden, there became a motivation to find a whole lot of this sickness. Well, same is true in education. Schools are given one level of money, $5,000, let's say, per student, who is, quote, normal. $10,000 or $15,000 if they have an IEP, a learning disability. Well, now all of a sudden, it behooves a lot of school administrators to find a whole lot of kids with an IEP, does it not? So I had a lot of kids that came to me that had been labeled learning disabled or having a learning difficulty. Within a matter of weeks, we had them up to grade level. It took hard work. It took one-on-one attention, but we accomplished it. And it was great. And it was an incredible accomplishment for all of these young people, many of whom still are in contact with me. I'm probably one of the only principals in America that in my last stewardship, when I resigned to move on to my next ministry, the students actually circulated a petition to call me back. How many kids want their principal back? Mine wanted me back. Empowering young people by giving them the tools and then letting them, and sometimes like in Little League, you swing and you miss. And sometimes you miss the ball and sometimes you drop the ball. But sometimes you catch it. Sometimes you hit it. And when a young person tastes and achieves success for themselves and makes them better, makes them want to do it again, to excel. But if you just hand it to them, well, like that second or third generation legacy business, it's gone, it's done, it's over. So this whole idea of equity obsession, and we're going to do it in education. And again, the liberals thinking that they know more than the parents. This is not a winning strategy. And I don't care whether you consider yourself a Democrat or Republican, a liberal or a conservative. You can be a Tea Party member, you can be a socialist. The reality of life is competitive. And by the way, the only ones who don't swallow any of this hogwash, the actual governing elites themselves. You can be sure that they and their children will have access to the best education possible. Why? Because thinking people want to be able to control non-thinking people. Think about it.